Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so this is the correct scene. Wiccan has been kind of growing on me recently. Now, since he came out, I definitely had a lot of worries about Wiccan that I will explain towards the end of the video. But before I go over all of that stuff, I also want to showcase some of the cooler things he can do and just in general how you can expect Wiccan to perform. So we're gonna start off quite nicely with this Gauntlet Terex fight. He's actually an amazing counter to a ton of champions similar to Terex in nature, but this specific node combination kind of makes him even better because he can just spam incinerates quite frequently due to powerful from afar node. You see, Wiccan is one of the few Mystic champions that has access to very consistent and persistent and reliable neutralize, and that is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and more important in this game, given that nullify immunity is becoming, increasingly more common. On top of that, Wiccan on his level 1 regenerates a tiny amount of missing health, typically, I believe it's 6 or 7%, but he regenerates 100% of the missing health as a result of damage over energy damage over time effects or bursts of energy damage. In case of Terex, he's inflicting energy damage with his rock field, so any and all damage you take from Terex due to rock field is kind of very easily mitigated. So, given the fact that you have access to neutralize, and you don't really need to worry from powerful from afar, and with that massive regeneration, you can just afford to be much more aggressive than you otherwise would. Here, I didn't notice that my neutralize did eventually drop off, so I'm going to have to reapply it. Not a big deal. So here we go, my neutralize is back on. Awesome. He has 23, 24 incinerates here. And they are doing a reliable job. Obviously, individually, they're not necessarily the highest ones, but all put together, considering that these are Grandmaster's Gauntlet health pools, they are definitely putting in a solid amount of work here. I have never once actually activated level 2 in this fight, which is because Terex is also kind of shock immune, but then it would be replaced with Degeneration, I believe. Still, I just kept spamming my level 1s, very simple fight, and regenerating all of that damage that I took from Terex. But in general, obviously, Wiccan is quite handy and relatively easy to use Mystic Champion for, majority of your needs, so to speak. He doesn't have the best access to nullify. He can nullify on his heavy attacks, as you can see here, but realistically, he's not necessarily the strongest nullify champion specifically. He's much more potent at preventing buffs from activating in the first place than dealing with the buffs that are already active. However, it is quite unique as well in itself that out of the champions that do have access to neutralize, they typically do not have nullification capabilities. Like Tigra doesn't nullify on her base kit. I think she has some synergies that can let her nullify some buffs, but on her base kit, she doesn't do that, and the same thing goes for Rintra. Rintra does not nullify buffs, as far as I'm aware, and Wiccan still does, at the very least, some of the buffs, so that's kind of cool. And here we can see, obviously, that's quite easy to control the fights here with Wiccan. So now it's going to be a bit longer clip, where I believe this is taken from 6.22, the Mr. Sinister quest. And here are going to be some interesting things. Now, this first fight is against the resistor node, so it is a bit kind of like cheating, because every time you prevent a buff from activating, and against the resistor node it would be on every single hit, then you're going to be placing an incinerate on King Groot. Yeah. However, you can notice that he still gained a fury buff whilst neutralize was active. Seems to be some weird interaction or bug or God knows what, but Rage Fury buffs somehow managed to bypass Neutralize, which is actually a good thing, because Wiccan can nullify those and feed Mystic Dispersion, and even if you get opponent to 5 Furies and they do go unblockable, Wiccan can block unblockable attacks from Cosmic Champions as long as he has one of the resistances up. This is definitely also kind of like a cool bit of utility, considering how many of these unblockable special nodes we have and be like water nodes and so on and so forth. So Wiccan being able to block unblockable hits is definitely quite awesome. Now we're going to go up against Thor. There is no resistor node on this fight, so it's not going to be quite as impressive, but it's still going to be a very good showcase, I think, of Wiccan's abilities. It might kind of screw up a bit in this fight, but we'll see about that. I was trying to get more power gain buffs, because that is another thing that a lot of people don't realize, is that you can stack your power gains, and they are more potent if you not happen to nullify like a fury buff with them, and then you get still not overly potent, but decent little bit of power gain from those heavy attacks. However, yeah, it really isn't all that potent, even if you do happen to nullify something. But still, that Tor is going down quickly, and there's not too much to worry about. So this test was a bit of a fail. It didn't kind of go exactly my way, but I also did want to showcase exactly that, obviously, because with Wiccan there are things that you have to keep in mind, and one of them is how to keep all of your spells active for as long as possible. Now, this next fight obviously is going to be brutally short. It's against Captain Marvel movie. And yeah, because you can just stack on some incinerates there, and now that I applied neutralize and there's an incinerate, you can see that she's completely melting, and I'm just going to drop a special attack and all her health immediately disappears. Also, another thing, I know it's not super important for vast majority of the purposes, but Wiccan is quite fun to play as a champion, and he also has very, very cool animations, in my opinion. And okay, back to kind of like more serious aspects. Obviously, he does have some cool synergies. If you do have Hulkling on your team, he can basically bypass miss throughout the entire fight. Therefore, there's quite a bit of added extra utility with that as well. Now, I did make a small mistake here, but it's all good because we're spamming those plasmas and incinerates and shocks. Also, thanks to synergy, he has an access to slow on his level 2s, which isn't too bad at all. And a Mystic Champion that can nullify, access to neutralize, and then get to also have access to miss counters and unstoppable and evade counters. I know, it's kind of cool. As I said, I have been noticing more and more fights around the contest, and I have seen some crazy alliance war boss takedowns with Wiccan. Wiccan also turns out to be one of the best counters for Hulkling specifically, which I think potentially could serve a purpose in Battlegrounds. Therefore, I'm super excited to test that out myself as well. And here, I think this is going to be the last fight where I do start with Aspect of Nightmares, and I actually got quite scared for my health, because I did not know whether I will survive this one or not. So I do drop my level 1 pretty much as soon as I can, because that level 1 healing does get more potent the lower your health is. So even if you haven't taken any energy damage and stuff like that, whilst you are low at your health, you can heal up relatively decently using those level 1 heals. It's not enough to offset recoil or anything like that, and Wiccan is definitely not a suicide-friendly champion that I happen to eat a level 2, but it's all good. So here you can see that due to Angela's Sig, I'm actually not placing any damage over time debuffs on her anymore. However, it's going to be a good place to showcase him being able to block the unblockable attacks. So here we can see that Angela is fully unblockable, but Wiccan just doesn't really care. Can't really nullify anything as well, so I kind of played this fight very badly and I got a bit stuck, but even with that, we can clearly see that, even though Angela is unblockable, you can play this fight perfectly normal. And this one is going to be against a buffet node as well, because I do think it's quite important that I showcase that neutralize also stops the healing from buffet, even though it doesn't stop the nullification itself of your buffs. So here we're going to see that as soon as I trigger buffet, you're going to see that pop up. We're going to lose the buff, but he's not going to gain any health from that node. So after level 2, obviously here is already quite a bit of debuffs on him immediately, which is another cool thing. I do like champions that can inflict like a ton of damage or time effects on opponent. It's always quite fun using those champions. Here I'm just spamming some of my heavy attacks. It's all good. We're going to go for another level 2. So as soon as I activate that level 2, you're going to notice that Buffet is going to activate, but he's not going to regenerate anything, even though the buff is nullified. And then another cool piece of utility. So all of these fights here have special chaos inversion. Obviously, it's an annoying node that many people hate dealing with. Any form of reverse controls on special attacks or not. But obviously, Wiccan is fully immune to reverse controls, which will inevitably make him lifesaver for quite a few people on some of the paths or nodes or fights where we do have these reverse controls. Because we never know when these nodes appear, and they are always hated by community. And whilst I personally think it is very useful if you try to get used to dealing with reverse controls, increasingly so, you might not have to, because we're getting more and more champions that are immune to reverse controls, like Wiccan, for instance. So obviously, as long as you're immune to reverse controls, this fight becomes just like a joke. Same thing for these next ones. So you're going to be using a special attack. I should have my controls inverted, but none of that stuff is going to happen. Right. Now we do need to talk about the downside of Wiccan. And this is one of those things that I really don't typically like of average generic champion showcases, or when these champions are discussed in general, whether it be on like live streams or line chats and things like that. And it's, I suppose, just the way, we, I guess, prefer to think and talk about champions, ignoring, anything that's bad and upsetting about them or less convenient. And in case of Wiccan, it will inevitably be his stats. So if we're going to take a look at global HP and sort by the smallest HP, Wiccan does indeed have, I believe, bottom 20. Oh no, never mind. He's 6th. Yeah, I skipped past him. So Wiccan has the 6th smallest health pool in the game. And that problem is kind of further increased with the fact that he has the lowest physical resistance in the game. The rest of his stats are average. However, there is a thing. Combination of negative physical resistance and small health pool means that he's going to be going down very, very quickly in pretty much every fight. His definition of glass cannon. Now, thankfully, his block proficiency is perfectly fine. So the story of Wiccan is, as long as you do not get hit directly, he's not going to feel like he's super squishy champion. He's similar to Professor X in that type of sense. As long as you're not getting hit, he's going to seem like a perfectly good champion, because physical resistance doesn't really affect your blocking damage much, if at all. Physical resistance does affect any and all damage you take from hits when you're not blocking. And to showcase just exactly how squishy he is, you can take a look at this clip. So in this clip, I'm just going to be standing there. This is a rank 3 Wiccan, no boosts, nothing. And we're going to be taking a look at how quickly Winter Soldier is going to dispatch from this guy. Obviously, there is a slight bit of RNG involved in terms of how quickly or how often that Winter Soldier procs the Fury buff. And, how often he crits and things like that. But you can try this yourselves, and even though individual run results might vary, but the base idea is going to be extremely easily noticeable. 32 hits for Winter Soldier, 25 seconds to take down a 6-star rank 3 champion. There are 4-stars who can last longer than that. And just to kind of emphasize the point, I'm going to take a Hood, who is excellently mediocre champion with mediocre health pool, with all of the stats somewhere in the middle. He's not a tank of any sort by any means, and he's definitely also, not a complete glass cannon. And even Hood, we can see it already here that, Winter Soldier is at the same point where Wiccan died, basically. 31 hits, 2 level 1s. Wiccan was dead here. Hood is still at 40%. And that is a direct result of that really, really low physical resistance and really small health pool. So now we can see that Wiccan lasted 32 hits, Hood lasted 51. So, you know, significantly more, like 80% more, 45 seconds. And then I, you know, did the same thing again. I restarted just to see, you know, perhaps it was a fluke or something, or perhaps Winter Soldier got super lucky. This second time, Wiccan is lasting slightly longer. It took this guy 37 seconds and 42 hits. But at the same time, second time around, Hood lasted significantly longer, where it took Winter Soldier 59 hits and 51 seconds. So Wiccan is very, very, very squishy. You can go down as quickly as 35 seconds. And then obviously, if you bring in somebody like Sasquatch, then, you know, there is like really no comparison there, in a sense that, yeah, Sasquatch is much livelier. So that is the thing with Wiccan. Wiccan definitely has upsides. I like the fact that he has Neutralize and some form of Nullify. I like the fact that he has access to a ton of damage over time effects. He can have very cheesy interactions. I made another video specifically with like Corvus and Tigra, where he can just inflict a ton of debuffs. Similar things happen with several other nodes. And there are definite upsides of having Wiccan. And I do think as time goes on, we're going to see Wiccan shine more and more in like very specific situations and fights. Obviously, at the moment, not that many people have access to this guy. But once I do, I do think he's going to become significantly more popular than he is right now. At the same time, I always do feel it to be extremely important to also showcase the things that are kind of holding him back and the downsides of this champion. And he is pretty much the biggest glass cannon in the game. I reckon even like Rocket Raccoon or somebody like that would, you know, survive longer, I suppose. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about Wiccan, and I'm gonna catch you guys soon. So yeah. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the next